All right, so we're diving deep today into how to absolutely nail that color sampling technician interview.
Yeah, it's a role with lots of opportunity, but also lots of other people who want it.
Exactly. So you got to stand out, and that's what we're here for, right? To give you that extra edge.
Absolutely. We've got some great source material to pull from, too.
Yeah, we've got this awesome career guide that breaks down the role, plus some sample interview questions to really get you prepped.
Oh, and don't forget about RoleCatcher.
Right, RoleCatcher is going to be key for tailoring your application and even getting feedback specifically for this kind of job.
It's like having a secret weapon in your back pocket.
Love that.
Hmm.
Okay, so before we jump into those questions, let's start with the basics. What does a color sampling technician actually do? I mean, we all know it involves color, obviously.
Right, but it's way more than just picking pretty shades.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I figured.
It's about creating those colors, developing formulas, making sure they stay consistent across different materials and batches. It's a very precise job.
So like the color of a t-shirt has to match the color of the fabric roll it came from.
Exactly. And it's not just fabrics either. It's paints, cosmetics, plastics. Pretty much any industry that uses color needs someone with a keen eye and technical skills to make sure everything matches.
Makes sense. And this career guide mentions that computer modeling is playing a bigger role now, too.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's changing the game by making it easier to test and refine those formulas digitally.
Which saves a ton of time and resources, I bet.
Absolutely. And it shows you're keeping up with industry trends if you can mention that in an interview.
Good point. Okay, before we get into the questions, let's talk about something that can be a bit intimidating, AI screening. It's everywhere these days.
Yeah, it can be tough to stand out when algorithms are making the first cut.
Exactly. So how can our listeners make sure their application even gets seen by a human?
That's where RoleCatcher comes in. It uses AI to help you tailor your CV and cover letter.
So it's like AI fighting AI.
Haha, in a way. Yeah, it analyzes those job descriptions and figures out exactly what keywords and skills those algorithms are looking for.
And then it tells you how to adjust your application so you're speaking their language.
Exactly. And it gives you feedback specific to the role you're applying for.
That's super helpful. Okay, let's dive into these interview questions. First up, what motivated you to become a color sampling technician? Seems simple enough.
It is, but it's also your chance to show them you're genuinely passionate about this.
So don't just say, I like colors.
Right. They want to hear what sparked your interest. What made you think, this is what I want to do?
Like a specific experience or project?
Exactly. Maybe an art class you loved or a fascination with how pigments work.
The interview guide has some good examples. One person talked about being amazed by the science behind creating those vibrant, lasting colors.
Perfect. That shows you've thought about this beyond just the surface level.
And it connects your artistic side with your technical skills.
Exactly. Now, be ready for a follow-up question like, what aspects of color sampling do you find most challenging and rewarding?
Ooh, good one. They're digging a little deeper there.
Yeah, they want to see your self-awareness and that you're genuinely interested in the nuances of the job.
Okay, next question. What experience do you have in color matching? What if someone's just starting out and doesn't have a ton of professional experience?
No problem. Highlight any relevant skills, even from hobbies or personal projects.
Like what?
Art classes, photography, even experimenting with mixing paints or dyes at home.
It's about showing those transferable skills.
Exactly. And if you do have work experience, mention specific techniques and tools you've used, like I'm proficient with spectrophotometers or I've worked with Pantone color systems.
Wait, those are the industry standards.
And you can level this up by using RoleCatcher. It analyzes the job description to pinpoint specific software or techniques mentioned.
So you can really tailor your answer to show you've done your research.
Right. If they emphasize experience with a specific color management software, make sure to mention it.
It shows you're paying attention to details. Okay, on to question 3. Can you explain the process you follow when matching colors?
This is where they're testing your understanding of the core process.
Like explaining a recipe step by step.
Exactly. Clear, concise, and accurate. They want to see you know what you're talking about.
The guide says to start with analyzing the sample, then selecting the right formula and mentioning any adjustments you might make.
Right. And be specific. Don't just say, I'd use a spectrophotometer. Tell them how you'd use it.
The example they give is first, I'd visually assess the sample under various lighting conditions. Then I'd use a spectrophotometer to obtain its color data and compare it against our database.
Perfect. It shows you understand the tools and the precision involved.
Okay, I'm getting the hang of this. What's next?
Well, they might throw in a curveball like, what are some of the challenges you've encountered in color matching and how did you overcome them?
Oh, that's a good one.
It's all about problem solving. So have a specific situation in mind and be ready to explain how you tackled it.
All right, question 4. How do you stay up to date with the latest color trends and technologies? This sounds like it's about being a lifelong learner.
Absolutely. They want someone who's passionate about the field and its evolution.
So what are some good ways to show that?
Mention any industry publications, you read conferences, you've attended online communities you're part of.
The guide even suggests following color experts on social media.
It all adds up, and it shows you're genuinely interested in what's new and exciting in the world of color.
A potential follow-up could be, what are some emerging color trends you're excited about, and how do you see them impacting the industry?
Ooh, that's a great one. It shows you're thinking ahead and have a vision for the future of color.
Okay, on to question 5. How do you handle situations where the client's expectations cannot be met?
This sounds like a tough one.
It is, but it's a classic behavioral question. They want to see how you handle conflict and solve problems.
So how should our listeners approach this one?
Tell a story, a brief but specific story about a time you faced a similar challenge, what you did, and the outcome. And the guide suggests choosing a story that highlights skills relevant to a color sampling technician.
Right, like attention to detail, finding creative solutions, and clear communication.
They might follow up with, how do you approach difficult conversations with clients or colleagues regarding color discrepancies?
Exactly. So think about your communication style and conflict resolution skills.
Okay, we've covered 5 questions so far, but there's a lot more to unpack. Ready to tackle the next set.
Absolutely. Let's do it. Okay, so where were we?
We left off with how to handle those tricky situations where you can't quite meet the client's expectations.
Ah, yes, those tough conversations. Well, let's move on to question number 6. How do you ensure that the colors you match are consistent across different batches and products?
This one seems like it's all about quality control, making sure everything is up to par.
Exactly. It's crucial in this role to understand how important consistency is, especially with all the variations in materials and dye lots you might encounter.
So should we bring back the technical terms here? Talk about spectrophotometers and all that jazz?
For sure. Mentioning those tools shows you know what you're doing and how to achieve that level of precision. They want to hear about using reference samples, following standardized procedures, anything that minimizes variations.
The guide actually gives an example where someone says, I always double-check my measurements and compare them to our established standards. I also keep detailed records of every batch to ensure traceability.
Perfect. That shows a real commitment to quality and attention to detail.
And speaking of attention to detail, let's not forget about RoleCatcher.
Oh, right. How does that tie in here?
Well, their AI can help you pick up on those keywords in the job description that relate to quality control. Maybe they specifically mention things like precision or traceability or certain quality standards.
Ah, I get it. So by weaving those terms into your answer, you're showing them you understand what they're looking for.
Exactly. It's about going beyond a generic response and really tailoring it to that specific company and role.
I like it. Okay, are you ready for a curveball?
Hit me with it.
Question 7. How would you handle a situation where a product had to be recalled due to color inconsistencies?
Whoa, okay, that escalated quickly. We're talking crisis management now.
Yeah. This one's a bit more intense. They really want to see how you think on your feet under pressure.
So how do you even approach a question like this?
Storytelling is still your friend here. But this time, it's about a time you dealt with a major setback.
So maybe not a full-blown recall, but a situation where a mistake was made and you had to take action.
Exactly. Think about a time you had to problem solve and think quickly on your feet.
The guide gives an example where someone discovered a color discrepancy in a batch of fabric and immediately halted production, investigated the cause, worked with the team to find a solution, and kept everyone informed throughout the process.
That's a great example. It highlights those key skills: problem-solving, communication, taking ownership. They want to see you can handle a crisis effectively.
And they might even ask a follow-up like, what steps would you take to prevent similar situations from happening in the future?
Right. They want to know you're thinking proactively about preventing problems, not just reacting to them.
And don't forget, RoleCatcher can be helpful here too.
How so?
Well, even if you haven't personally experienced a recall, their AI can analyze the job description and give you some insights into the types of crisis scenarios that might be relevant to that specific role.
So it's like having a heads up about potential challenges you might face.
Exactly. All right, moving on. Question 8. How do you prioritize your workload when dealing with multiple color matching requests? This sounds like it's all about time management.
Absolutely. They want to see that you can juggle multiple projects, meet deadlines, and stay organized without sacrificing quality.
So saying I make a to-do list isn't going to cut it.
Probably not. You
Uh-huh.
need to demonstrate a more systematic approach. Talk about how you assess the urgency of each request, maybe using a prioritization matrix or a similar method.
One of the sample responses says, I always start by understanding the deadlines and client expectations for each request. Then I use a color matching software to analyze the samples and estimate the time required for each task. This allows me to create a realistic schedule and communicate any potential delays proactively.
Now, that's a strong answer. It shows you're organized, proactive, and understand the importance of clear communication.
And be ready for those follow-up questions like, how do you handle unexpected delays or changes in priorities?
Right. They want to see how you adapt and stay calm under pressure.
Don't forget, RoleCatcher can help fine-tune your answer here too by identifying specific project management tools or methodologies mentioned in the job description.
Right. Like if they use Agile or Kanban, you can mention those terms to show you're familiar with their workflow.
Okay, on to the last question. Question 9. How do you ensure that your work complies with relevant regulations and standards? The legal stuff not always the most exciting,
Yeah.
but definitely important.
Oh, it's crucial. No one wants a color recall because they used a banned pigment or didn't follow safety protocols. This question is all about showing you're aware of those regulations and committed to doing things by the book.
So how do you answer this without sounding like you're reciting a legal textbook?
Start by identifying the specific regulations that are relevant to your work. Think product safety, environmental protection labeling requirements, things like that. Then talk about how you stay informed about changes in those regulations.
The guide mentions being a member of a professional organization and attending their webinars on regulatory updates is a good example.
Perfect. That shows you're proactive and take compliance seriously. You can also mention staying up to date on your company's internal policies.
And of course, be prepared for those follow-up questions. They might ask, can you describe a situation where you had to ensure compliance with a specific regulation, and how did you approach it?
Right. They want to see your real-world experience and problem-solving skills in action.
And that wraps up all 9 questions. We've covered a lot of ground, but before we move on to some final thoughts, let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture of this career path. What do you think?
Sounds good. I'm always curious about how different roles evolve over time.
Well, this career guide has a really interesting section on career progression. It outlines the typical path from entry-level to senior roles and how your responsibilities and skills might change as you gain experience.
It's like a roadmap for your career, even if your plans change along the way.
Exactly. For example, a junior color sampling technician might focus on following established recipes and procedures, while a senior technician might be involved in developing innovative color solutions and mentoring junior staff.
And for those who are aiming even higher, maybe towards a management role, the guide outlines the skills and experience you'd need to get there.
And speaking of skills, the career guide also has a bunch of links to other resources that can help you level up your knowledge in specific areas.
Right, those links to sections for core skills, complementary skills, even transferable skills. It's like a treasure trove of information for anyone who wants to become a true color expert.
It really is.
Yeah.
So we've talked about acing the interview, understanding career progression, and utilizing those valuable resources. What are your final thoughts for our listeners as they embark on this colorful journey?
I think it's important to remember that while technical skills are essential, passion and genuine interest in color are equally important.
I completely agree. This field is constantly evolving, so a willingness to learn and adapt is key.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid to let your personality shine through. That's what will make you stand out and connect with potential employers.
So we've covered a ton of ground in this deep dive, from interview questions and AI screening to career paths and resources.
Yeah, we've really gone in depth on what it takes to succeed as a color sampling technician.
Exactly. But before we wrap up, I wanted to touch on one thing we haven't explicitly addressed yet. It's in the career guide's pros and cons section, and I think it's important for anyone considering this field.
Oh, I'm curious. What is it?
It's the reality of working with chemicals. As a color sampling technician, you're likely going to be exposed to dyes, pigments, solvents, all sorts of stuff.
That's a really good point. It's not all about pretty colors. There's a scientific side to it, and sometimes that can be a bit hazardous.
Exactly. The guide mentions things like wearing protective gear, following strict safety protocols. And depending on the work environment, there could be fumes or other potential risks.
It's definitely something to be aware of. Not to scare anyone off, but it's important to go in with a realistic understanding of the job and the potential hazards involved.
Absolutely. And this is where doing your research on specific companies comes in. Some might have state-of-the-art labs with top-notch safety measures, while others might be a bit more old school.
Right. You can even ask about safety protocols during the interview. It shows you're taking it seriously and thinking about your well-being.
And speaking of the interview, remember how we talked about showcasing your unique personality and experiences? Well, this is a great opportunity to do that.
I see where you're going with this.
If you have experience with lab safety from a previous job or maybe even a science class, you can mention that. It shows you're already familiar with some of those protocols.
That's a great way to tie it back to your skills and make a positive impression. So we've talked about some of the potential downsides, but let's not forget about the amazing aspects of this career.
Absolutely. The guide highlights some incredible pros working with color aesthetics, being hands-on the potential for creativity and specialization.
And the job security is a big plus. As long as there are products that need to be colored, there will be a need for skilled color sampling technicians.
That's definitely reassuring. Okay, I think we've covered just about everything from our sources. What do you say we wrap up with some final nuggets of wisdom for our listeners?
Sounds good. And remember, this deep dive is just the beginning of your journey. We've given you the tools and knowledge, but it's up to you to take the next step and make it happen.
So here's a final thought-provoking question for you to ponder. We talked about future color trends, but what about the bigger picture? How do you see the role of a color sampling technician evolving in the next 5–10 years?
Ooh, now that's an interesting question. We've already touched on the impact of AI and sustainability, but what about things like personalized color palettes, 3D printed textiles, or even color-changing materials?
The possibilities are endless. And as a future color sampling technician, you could be at the forefront of those innovations shaping the way we experience color in our everyday lives.
That's an exciting thought. It's not just about matching colors anymore. It's about pushing the boundaries of what's possible with color.
And that's what we hope this deep dive has given you, not just answers, but a sense of the excitement and potential that this career holds.
So go out there, is that interview, and let your passion for color shine through.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of color sampling technicians. We're cheering you on every step of the way.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those colors vibrant.